Blueprint function libraries Light Talk today, which is a topic that I saw recently because as I showed before, the SFX generic system that I was creating and blueprint function libraries were something that could do what I wanted to do. So in this Light Talk, we're going to see why, a quick definition, the basic creation, the benefits, and also limitations. So first of all, why blueprint function libraries? So you're seeing in front of you as an implementation for meta sounds, and as we discussed before, meta sounds can get pretty complex. They allow you to export some values. You can trigger multiple parts independently. And so with that in mind, a typical integration would look something like this. You would reference an object like generic UE success. So you have to know how to reference an object, and then you have to know which nodes will do what in order to trigger some kind of audio system. So the goal I had was to do all of this groundwork for the user, for us at the team, so anyone can use my system at the end, any artist, any programmer. So at the end, it would like something like this. I have all of my system mapped up, like you saw, the implementation that you saw on the last slide. All of that will be contained inside a single node. So it's very easy to use. When you want to use that system, you just use this node. And as you can see, you also have different values, different selections that you can do, so that at the end, the user doesn't have to do all of that. It doesn't have, imagine if for each sound that we would play using that system, I would just tell you to just grab those tools, grab those nodes, and it will work, and you'd have to reference the objects yourself. It's not interesting. So, which is why I really wanted to, and I'm glad this is possible, to create my system, my actual, the way that I design it, and give that tool to anyone in the team. So what is a blueprint function library? They're a collection of static functions. So I discovered that the other day. Of course, static functions are accessible from anywhere in your Unreal project, and they operate independently. They don't rely on any game-specific value or instance data. For example, they can't hold a variable from your game. They can hold variables, but not from anything in the project. They run once and that's it. You think of them as just run once functions. So with that in mind, if you want to set up a blueprint function library, it's very simple. You just right click and you would create such object. It's named the same. And this will open up your blueprint interface like you know. So that nothing too insane. And then we have the content, just like any function. You have your variables, which those are local. So when you create another function, those variables will be gone. They're specific to that function. It's very specific to that one function. You cannot do any link. I mean, it's not meant for that. And then on the right, we have our inputs, which is probably the highlight of all of this, which is why I did this. As you can see, we create a new function. And if I add inputs, then that's where the customization of the system starts, giving the user the possibility to select a Boolean or enter a string, for example. So at the end of the day, the user will only see this. You can go in any blueprint and you will be able to see this test function and you can call it. And so if I want to have a complex system inside of here, if I don't put any inputs, then it's going to be static. It's going to be, static is the wrong word for this, but it's going to be very linear. There's not going to be any type of depth. But if I just give the user a Boolean or a string, then all of my system can now react depending on what the user inputted. So And as you can see, there are also nodes that you can link to. So you don't have to put the string manually. You can link it to something that you have in a blueprint. The Boolean, the same thing. But the user doesn't need to see all of that functionality that you would put after the new function. And with those inputs, that's where you can make your system more customizable and more fun to use, which I did with the generic SFX system. So first, I did in the first point, I did say that I need objects to access meta sounds. They need to be referenced, and you cannot drag and drop an object into a blueprint function library. So how do you reference an object? What I did was creating a blueprint class, like a master blueprint. Then I will put it inside the level. And then inside my functionality, you can do, inside your functionality or mine, I can do, or you can do a get actor of all class, get actor of class, not all class, get actor of class. And as you can see, my object is a class, so I'm able to retrieve it within the level. And then I can access all of the children inside, which is where I put my meta sounds. I'm putting my meta sounds inside that master blueprint, and then I can access it inside my blueprint function library and call the right audio component when I need it. So that's why you would do it to if you need to use an object, that's a workflow you can do. So my system, in order to work, you just need to have that BP sound container inside your level. Then the benefits from using the meta sounds, which I talked about previously, but to go over again. So I found it very satisfying to be able to create a system exactly what I want, so I can control what the user can do, and I can control what the customization with the values, with the input, is going to do too. So I have full control over it. It simplifies the implementation for someone else. So let's say a creator, like an artist or a programmer, they want now to use sound for their new feature. Well, they can just call my generic sound SFX node and select a sound that they want, and they can also link their values to the sound value to maybe create something more dynamic very easily. They don't need to set up all of that logic that you can see on the screen right now. It's kind of this complex logic where you have to know all the nodes and how to call them, etc., how to reference them inside the meta sounds. You need to understand that in order to implement it. So the user doesn't have to do any of this. It can just call the node, and that's really a big benefit for the blueprint function library. Also, of course, avoid duplication and ease eases maintenance. So you don't have to duplicate a very lengthy implementation each time you want to call something from that system. You would just call your simple node. And the maintenance will be also very easy because now everything is at the exact same place. And so it will be easy to fix if there's a problem. So with everything that I said, this generic SFX node is very useful, and everything can act dynamically because everything is a pin. So you can control the volume of that SFX if you link a float to it. Same for the pitch, same for the loop. Variation is an integer that will select a different sound. Within that sound that you selected, there will be variation. So this is an example, of course, but that's how I could put everything inside of there and let the user then use it, which makes sense. Then lastly, we will see the limitations, just briefly. Since, as I said, there are static functions, there's some stuff that you cannot use, like the delay node will not be there, for example, because time is a game value. It needs to be stored. Time needs to be stored in a way. So you won't have stuff like delay length. And I don't mean delay length, but the delay node. And if your system needs to use any variable or anything that's from the game specifically, you want to keep a parameter, keep a variable, that is not going to be meant for that. So it only runs once. It doesn't retain anything. but it can be accessed from everywhere. You don't need to reference it. You don't need to really call it. You don't need to hold something inside a blueprint to use it. It's usable everywhere. And in my scenario, since I'm only using Unreal specific nodes, I can also reuse my system in another product. It will work the same. And I think that's a big thank you for listening to the Lightning Talk. And now we move on to discussion. It doesn't say Q&A, of course, because I don't know if I'll be able to answer the technical questions. But if you have anything to add, please feel free. Any question that you have, thank you so much.
Yeah, there is a question. So for me, there is a question that have been like in my mind since you started working on this system. Yeah,
Yeah.
for this systems, as far as I know, these sounds are generated by some waves.
Okay.
So
In the first version, there were, but now I'm switching to I switched to real samples that I made specifically.
yeah,
But if
so
what was your question around that?
yeah, my question was like, what if I want to add my own sound effects or VO or whatever? So how would I do that? Like, how
I
would I
could.
just like what is the workflow for me to just go ahead and start adding some sound that I want to add?
Well, then currently, if we see my, oh, let me go back to thank you. Just right now, the that node doesn't allow you to add your own sound, but this would be a feature that I can add. I would add in an audio component, and if you do specify that and you don't select the sound, then I would treat your new sound as the thing to play. So it can be a I can create that functionality for you if that's something you request. Then it can be you would be able to do that. I will be able to take that audio component, I mean audio file, and turn it into the audio component, etc. But yeah, that's something you will be able to do too
Mm-hmm.
if I set that up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. That that answers my question.
Yeah.
Could, could we have callbacks when the audio is finished?
Sorry, again,
Like something
sorry.
to happen when it's finished?
When the sound
Like
is finished,
yes, something to happen, like a callback.
Call back
right
or
now,
a delay.
when you that that delay, sorry, that node displays just like it will either play a one shot, or if you select loop, it will loop. So I do have another that we can see in that screen. I have a stop generic SFX as well. So right now my system is only two nodes, play and stop, but I could have something else as well. And so I'm using my example, but I was thinking maybe someone from the team could create their own system, maybe like to trigger VFX or something to really control how they want to the programmers and the artists to trigger their stuff, which is a yeah. The example for me was that meta sound system.
Yeah, it was really
So, so the question was more about: is there a way to attach something that happens like asynchronously after a sound is completed?
Yeah, that's like
And
the
Ah,
most often
right,
stuff that happens to me. Kind of
and
do
that
something when the audio is finished.
right,
Kind
and,
of.
when
and
the
the
audio is
answer
finished.
the answer is not with a
Yeah.
blueprint function library, because blueprint functions, at least the ones that you can create inside the editor, don't have any ability to do async, not
Yeah, I
trivially.
think.
So there's a way that you can do it. You can either write your own like an async node, but you can also
Yeah.
look at using macro libraries. And macro libraries allow you to have kind of like arbitrary exec pins, output exec pins, which can potentially be fired
Oh,
async, I believe. Yeah.
oh yeah.
So,
Which is
but
the
it does mean that those nodes can only be used inside an like a context that can support async. So, as in, those nodes would only be valid inside
Event
the
graphs.
event graph.
Yeah, event
Yeah.
graphs.
Hmm. So yeah, to have maybe this node to have an also an output pin that would say end of sound,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
that's very interesting. Maybe um, because if that means retaining a value, yeah, that I think we will encounter a problem. But uh,
It kind
well,
of
that's a
is.
very interesting. That's a great question, and that would be a great thing to have also. Yeah, an output pin so that you can trigger something after it's done. Maybe there might be a way with an event or something inside the meta sounds that will retrieve the value, the duration, and then do. I'm not sure, but great question. That would be a cool feature, yeah. And maybe yeah, look into the macros library, which is probably something also great. And yeah, anything else?
I just wanted to say the background you can see for the discussion.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Spain and
what is
France.
this
It's
for
fun.
presentation? What are you using?
Oh,
What's
so
for?
I told Creel the story. Today I bought a